Well, our next guest was a member of the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, from 2015 to 2019. Before that, he served as Israel's ambassador to the United States for nearly 5 years. He's a historian as well, wrote a great book about the Six-Day War and about U.S. relationships with Israel. And in a recent article for The Atlantic, Michael Oren said he strongly feels this war is unlike any other war Israel has seen. And he believes that any possible ground incursion into Gaza will last for a long time.
Michael Oren joins us now from Tel Aviv. Sure appreciate you being with us, Michael. I know when this surprise attack happened, you immediately responded. You got on a plane. What have you been actively working on since Saturday's surprise attack?
Well, thanks for having me, Kyra. It's very good to see you. Well, since coming down, I've been explaining Israel's position, perspective around the clock and around the world. It's been difficult. What can I say? We all feel personally deeply hurt, moved, disturbed by the images we've seen. We all know people who have been killed, who have been maimed, who have been taken captive. My children are in bomb shelters. My grandchildren are in bomb shelters. I'm in a bomb shelter right now. You have books behind me, but this is the family bomb shelter. We all have them here in Israel. We had a bomb destroy a building down the street just 2 days ago. So it's all intentionally personal, but it is important to explain this perspective to a world which looks at what's occurred here and is shaking its head sometimes, saying, how could this possibly happen? Who are these vicious, barbaric terrorists known as Hamas? And what is the United States going to do? And I have to tell you, honestly, we all listened around the TV to President Biden's speech 2 nights ago, to Secretary Blinken's talk today in Tel Aviv. And we were profoundly moved at the time of our greatest agony. This is the greatest single loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust. To have the leaders of the most powerful country in the world to come out in support of us in that way, so categorically, so unequivocally condemning terror, was very moving for all of us. A great source of relief. But as you have mentioned, and as your reporter has mentioned, we are at the beginning of this war. We're not even at the end of the beginning. And yes, there is a possibility of a multi-front conflict as Israel moves into Gaza, and that's almost certain now, as our reserves have built up to well over 300,000 soldiers. It's difficult for me to believe, I think anybody believe, that Hezbollah is going to sit quietly in Lebanon and not pull a trigger.
Well, that Michael, is obviously an alarming prospect, but I want to ask about your sense that this war is different. Israel's history, having to fight nation states and terrorist groups for its survival. This war, you feel, is different. Is it because of the shocking nature of the atrocity and the scale of it that was perpetrated, or because of what Israel's war aims are? You say they're ready to go into Gaza. To do what?
On both scores, Terry, it's this. Most of our wars, the 1967 Six-Day War, the 1973 Yom Kippur War, they're fought between armies. They were fought with tanks and planes, men in uniform. And for the most part, they were fought far from our population centers with very few civilian casualties. This war, by very marked contrast, is fought in the Israeli heartland. It is the vast majority of our casualties are civilians. We're fighting against an enemy that wants to destroy us at any cost, and will do so in the most brutal manner and massacre our civilians. And our war aims here are not just to defeat an enemy, not to actually defeat an enemy and hope that enemy will change its position, as say Jordan did, or Egypt did, or the other countries that our countries that have now signed onto the Abraham Accords. We have peace with these countries after being in war with them for many years. There's no chance for peace with Hamas. Hamas is never going to accept a peace agreement with Israel. It's committed to our destruction. It will kill Palestinians who want to have peace with Israel. So it's very different. So we're going to have to go into a densely populated area where the streets, the alleys are heavily mined and booby-trapped. There is a warren of attack tunnels under all these streets. For our soldiers, it will be very complex and dangerous. And diplomatically speaking, from my perspective, it raises the question, can Israel avoid inflicting civilian casualties? Of course, nobody wants to hurt civilians, but we're dealing with an enemy who uses civilians as human shields, and they'll use the hostages, at least 150 hostages, they'll use them as human shields as well.
So are you saying the answer is to go in and completely dismantle Hamas, no matter what it takes, even if it takes, and it will, the lives of civilians? Is that the only way to eradicate this type of, because they were elected, leadership in Gaza?
Yeah, they were elected. It's true. They were quite popular, and there was a lot of celebrations among the Gazan population when our civilians were massacred. But listen, we're not here to pass judgment on the civilians of Gaza. Our goal is not to inflict civilian casualties if it can be avoided. And our Air Force drops leaflets, and we send SMS messages to residents in areas that are going to be the scene of fighting, and they will flee for those areas. That is our hope. But having said that, yes, the people of Israel are determined to end the Hamas threat. This is now the 5th round of fighting with Hamas. Every time we go back to that status quo, which is, they fire a couple thousand rockets at us, they ruin our lives, they kill our civilians, and then we go back to that status quo ante, with Qataris paying the money. We let 20,000 Gazan workers into our fields every morning. And Hamas is not interested in the quality of life. It's not interested in that amount of money. It's not interested in the well-being of those workers or the salaries they bring home to their families. They're only interested in one thing, and that's destruction, our destruction. And so, yes, at an operation that's going to be proved almost certainly highly costly for our military personnel, our women and men in uniform, yes, we have to do this. We can never again face this type of threat. And we are grateful to our friends around the world, particularly the United States, for offering that assistance. It's quite remarkable.
Earlier today, we spoke with the former Jordanian ambassador to Israel. I know you know Marwan Muasher, and this is what he had to say about why he just sees no end in sight, Michael.
The problem today that we face is this cycle of violence, killings on both sides, civilian killings on both sides. I'm afraid is going to continue until the international community addresses the root cause of the problem, which is that we have an occupation, and it is the longest occupation in modern history. And that problem has to be solved. There has to be a political process.
Your response and
my
how
response
you
is
see.
I have a great regard for Muasher, but I disagree with him profoundly. One, there's no cycle of violence. We didn't shoot at Gaza. They shot at us. We didn't cross their border and kill 1,200 people of their civilians. They did to us. We didn't shoot their families. We didn't dismember and burn young people at a concert in the desert. They shot 260 concert goers. I don't think there's a cycle of violence. Second of all, this has nothing to do with Israel's relationship with the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria, what you call the West Bank. Hamas opposes a two-state solution. I've been involved in diplomacy for a long time. I was an advisor to the Rabin administration in 1993 at the time of the Oslo Accords. Hamas came out and killed people to prevent those accords from advancing. They killed Israelis and Palestinians alike who supported the peace process. This has nothing to do with that. And I think Israelis are quite frankly, and I think justifiably afraid. The head of the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank today is Mahmoud Abbas. He's in the 18th year of his 4-year term. He won't run for re-election because he knows that Hamas would win. So if we had a Palestinian state, Hamas would take that over. So we'd have Hamas in Gaza, Hamas to the east of us in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. And from the window, you can't see it in this bomb shelter, I look eastward from Tel Aviv and I see the city of Hebron, a Palestinian city. So I would not be in rocket range. I would be in rifle range. So it's not about not having a peace process, not about having a two-state solution. It's about a vicious, medieval, barbarous terrorist organization that simply wants to kill Jews. It is no different than ISIS. It is no different than Al-Qaeda. No one had to find an excuse to explain why ISIS kills Americans or while Al-Qaeda killed Americans. It was just their nature. It's the same nature as Hamas.
That's profoundly depressing long term. And I want to ask you about that and about your work in Washington when you were here as ambassador with the then Vice President Joe Biden. One of the things that Ambassador Muasher told us is he thought that President Clinton was a president committed to finding a solution that would end what we see, this Israel constantly attacked, the Middle East just a wreck because of it, because of the constant wars. What do you make of the response of President Biden? And would that same kind of leadership from the United States for peace that President Clinton showed make a difference?
It is. And in fact, I gave the president very, very high marks here. Let's not look at this glass, very half empty. And it's very easy to look at that half empty glass like this week. I've been involved in Middle East diplomacy now for 30 plus years. And when we started, certainly when I came to Israel in the 70s, we had no peace with Egypt. We had no peace with Jordan. We certainly had no peace with the Abraham Accord countries. And if you would probably ask me back then if those peace agreements were possible, I'd say you're probably crazy. So we have accomplished the seemingly impossible by making peace with some of our most strident enemies over the course of years through very committed diplomacy. So progress is possible. Progress is possible. With Hamas, it's not possible. And certainly President Clinton tried mightily to reach an agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. We together, Israel and the United States, offered the Palestinians a two-state solution. Yasser Arafat walked away from it. Clinton said that Arafat had made him a failure. And then Arafat walked away again. This was in the year 2000. He walked away again in the year 2001. Mahmoud Abbas walked away from another two-state solution offer in 2008. It's not as if they haven't been offered a two-state solution. They turned them down, the Palestinians, most often with violence. So it wasn't for the lack of presidential efforts. President Obama, during my period, Secretary of State John Kerry, shuttled back and forth for months on end, trying to get a peace process going. And Mahmoud Abbas walked away from that process too. It's not for lack of trying. But what we have seen is that through American mediation, we can reach peace agreements. Not with everybody. We're not reaching a peace agreement with Syria. We're not reaching a peace agreement with other countries in the Middle East, certainly not with Iran, but with Egypt, Jordan, the United Arab Emirates, with Bahrain, Sudan, and now Morocco, very important Arab country. Peace has been possible. And these peace agreements have proven to be very durable. Even during this current conflict, no one's talking about breaking off these peace agreements.
Just real quickly, because we've got to wrap, we could talk to you all day, but Ambassador Mwasher thought this would be the end of Netanyahu and his government. Just briefly, yes, no, do you think this is it for Netanyahu, or is he going to survive this?
I think it's very early now to start pointing the finger. In Israel, we investigate. And in previous instances where we've been surprised, as in 1973, as in 2006, the 7 Lebanon War, there were investigations afterward, and people resigned, people in very high positions. No one is above responsibility in this country. All right.
Michael Oren, former Israeli ambassador to the U.S. Thank you very much. That was really helpful. Appreciate it.
Great to have you, Michael.
Thank you very much. Both of you. Good night.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.